Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, unable, apparently, to star in a single game worth playing. Yes, it's Superman! We've covered the Dark Knight, we've tackled the red sticky guy, and now it is time to dig into the Man of Steel.
Upon his comics debut in 1938, Superman, or Superman, made an immediate impact upon the public consciousness, and cemented for generations to come what it means to be a superhero. He had the costume, the secret identity, the rogues gallery, the girlfriend who kept dying, the moustache that could only be removed with expensive CGI. Really, the list goes on and on.
In Superman's own words, he fought for truth, justice, and the American way. That doesn't really mean much to us Brits. If you're somehow not familiar with Superman, then he's basically Mr. Motivator if he were always angry at Gene Hackman.
Anyway, as famous as Superman is, he hasn't had nearly as many games as his brooding and/or web-slinging counterparts. For that reason, we are expanding our scope a bit for this list. In addition to standard Superman games, we are including a handful of Justice League games. Superman is typically portrayed as the leader of that group, so as long as he had a significant presence in the game, we think that's fair. What's more, for the first time ever, we are including educational games in our rankings. I'm not sure if you should thank us for this, or find us and beat us up. I'll let you decide.
As usual, we are not counting mobile games, browser games, or plug-and-play games, because I don't want this, and you don't want me to want this. Also, games in which Superman only has a cameo or isn't playable for any notable length of time don't count. That's unfortunate, as typically the less Superman a game has, the better, but them's the rules. Let's rank 'em. I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter from TripleJump, and this is every Superman game ranked from worst to best.
Number 25. Superman The New Adventures, Nintendo 64. Commonly known as Superman 64 or even just Superman, the confusion behind the name of Superman The New Adventures is justified, as there's no title on the front of the box, probably for the same reason kidnappers don't sign their ransom notes. The legendary awfulness of this game is legendary, I suppose. I would love to say that the criticism is overblown, but it's really not. It's genuinely terrible, and if anything, it deserves even more vitriol than has been showered upon it for the past 2 decades. The fact that you spend most of the game flying through rings is the least of Superman 64's problems. The limited draw distance, the broken controls, the primitive graphics, the copious glitches, everything about the game speaks to a rushed and careless development. Basically, if the rings really were its worst feature, Superman 64 would just be monumentally tedious. Instead, it's about as close to being unplayable as you can get without the cartridge being blank. Number 24. Superman, Atari 2600. The earliest Superman game is understandably his most primitive, but it does an admirable job of hitting all the points that fans might expect. You start as Clark Kent, you change into Superman in a phone booth, you stop Lex Luthor, you kiss Lois Lane, you even report for work at the Daily Planet. You'd be forgiven for not realizing that those things happen in this game though, because it looks like somebody tipped over a crate of Duplo blocks and left them where they fell. We enjoyed Spider-Man's Atari adventure enough, but Superman's equivalent is an overcomplicated and vague mess. Forgiving gamers of the late 70s gave it decent reviews, probably because the only other games available were Asteroids and Trying to Swallow Your Joystick Whole. Interestingly, it was one of the earliest games with a pause feature. I'm not sure if you can unpause it though. Apparently nobody ever saw a reason to try. Number 23. Superman Activity Center, PC. We didn't include educational titles in our list of every Batman game because, well, Batman actually starred in a decent number of real games. If you were disappointed that we didn't discuss the Batman Activity Center though, you're in luck. It's similar enough to the Superman Activity Center that they actually contain many of the same games. Are those games any good? Can you even ask that question with a straight face? Superman Activity Center contains a number of diversions, including coloring books, mazes, and logic puzzles. You can also play Othello with Lex Luthor in the hopes of boring him to death. When you run out of things to do, you can use Superman's X-ray vision to spy on the neighbours, you know, like a good guy. The highlight is unquestionably when Superman's dad blasts him off Krypton by playing a game of Simon. It's honestly the most colourful representation of an entire race's extinction that you'll ever see. Number 22. Superman the Game, Acorn Electron, Amstrad CPC, Atari 8-bit Family, BBC Micro, Commodore 16, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. Superman the game is hard to explain to anyone who hasn't played it. Actually, it's hard to explain to anyone who has played it. It's hard to explain in general, and I'm not entirely convinced it was developed by human beings. The game is split into 6 different sequences, all of which evidently focus on Superman squaring off against Darkseid. I say evidently because I have to take the game's word for most of what's happening. In the only interesting design decision, a second player can take control of Darkseid. See? There he is now, scooting along the bottom of the screen like that thing that shoots at space invaders. Classic Darkseid. It's never clear what you have to do or how you're meant to do it, and the fact that the game is split across so many different modes means you're unlikely to get a handle on any of them. I'd love to remind you that better games are ahead, but, well, even that is debatable. Number 21. Justice League Chronicles, Game Boy Advance. Playing through Justice League Chronicles made me want to apologise on the developer's behalf. In fact, I'm nearly certain this was the first game developed by an entire team that was asleep. There's no other excuse for how relentlessly dull and uninteresting Justice League Chronicles is. The game consists of 3 levels. Count them. I'll wait. I won't even have to wait long because you're only counting to 3. Each level sees a different pairing of heroes. There's Flash and Green Lantern, Batman and Hawkgirl, and Superman and Wonder Woman. It took me longer to read that sentence than it would take you to play through the game. The gameplay consists of moving tiny, ugly sprites around and wishing God would just take you home. The closest thing to a redeeming factor is that Justice League Chronicles offers 2-player co-op via the GBA link cable. It's a great way of letting someone know you hate them without having to say it out loud. Number 20. Superman the Greatest Hero, V-Smile. Well, if the title of a V-Smile game says it, it must be true. Anyway, Superman the Greatest Hero is another educational game, but this one has a twist. You actually get to do things as Superman, like video game things with levels and everything. I know. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it either. The educational content consists of Superman having to match items to their descriptions, solve maths problems, and figure out very basic puzzles. Okay, so yeah, that sounds like pretty much any educational game, but this one has a jump button. So there. Its presentation isn't half bad either. It's by no means a game I would encourage anyone to seek out. You'll never own a V-Smile, and you know it. But hey, somebody seems to have invested some effort into this thing. Not much effort, and none of that effort amounted to anything, but credit where it's due. Number 19. Justice League Injustice for All, Game Boy Advance. If anyone can make a great Justice League game, it's the people who made that awful Thunderbirds thing for the Game Boy Advance. I'm joking, of course. Justice League Injustice for All makes Thunderbirds International Rescue look like the Ocarina of Time. The levels are repetitive and often confusing, with important items and enemies obscured by foreground elements. And whenever the game tries to mix things up, such as with a flying segment, you really, truly wish it wouldn't. Injustice for All gets many things right, but those things are superficial. The wide range of playable characters, for instance, is welcome, but their movesets are limited to the point that they often feel the same. There's also a nice assortment of villains, but they don't play much of a role beyond something to punch at the end of a level. Basically, if you enjoy being disappointed, Injustice for All won't disappoint. Wait, hang on. Number 18. Superman Returns, Fortress of Solitude, Game Boy Advance. Pop quiz, hotshot. What is Superman's weakness? If you said kryptonite, that was a strange thing to do, as I obviously can't hear you. Anyway, according to Superman Returns Fortress of Solitude, his real weakness is Sudoku. Seriously, Cal cannot get enough. To be accurate, the puzzles here use icons instead of numbers and will sometimes tweak the rules of proper Sudoku, but since a game full of Sudoku-like puzzles is called Superman Returns, I don't think accuracy is really a concern. Maybe the Fortress of Solitude subtitle implies that these puzzles help Superman pass the time while sitting on the super lavatory. Between batches of puzzles, the game does allow you to fly and kill things, but you don't have to complete these sequences successfully. Fail, and you advance to the next chapter anyway. After all, Sudoku is the important bit of the Superman experience. Everything else is just padding.
Number 17. Justice League Heroes United, Arcade. Justice League Heroes United, which sounds like a football team, is not just a game title in search of a colon, it's also redundant as well. The Justice League is literally a bunch of united heroes. Did they think we wouldn't notice this? We noticed. There was nothing else notable about the game, so of course we noticed. The story involves the united heroes taking to the streets to kick the teeth out of palette-swapped bad guys until the player runs out of 50p pieces. And it's even less interesting than it sounds. A beat-em-up game lives and dies on how its combat feels, and the combat of Justice League Heroes United feels like sitting on a safety pin. Its animations are strangely slow as well, making attacks seem soft and inconsequential. The repetition is absurd, with hordes of identical enemies raining down on you, and what's more, the game has extremely long loading times, which is puzzling when you realise that this machine was built to do nothing other than play this one single game. Pretty shameful. Number 16. Superman the Man of Steel. Acorn Electron, Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Apple II, Atari ST, BBC Micro, Commodore 64, MSX, ZX Spectrum, and PC. This is the Superman game that was released for the largest number of consoles. Wait, do I mean highest? This is the Superman game that was released for the largest number of highest. Nailed it. As we've seen many times, however, that doesn't mean the game was any good. In fact, let me dispel any confusion right now. This game is not any good. It does have some varied gameplay, which is nice, but I'd have preferred it if any of the modes was slightly fun. What can I say? I'm picky. For the most part, the game is the same across each of its platforms, with the exception of the graphics. The ZX Spectrum version is perfect if you wish the game had been ported to a Game & Watch, for example. The only other major difference is the loading time. In fact, some of them take so long to load that you might die before getting to play, which is probably a welcome feature. Number 15. Justice League Task Force, Mega Drive and SNES. If you like fighting games but wish that they weren't that good, Justice League Task Force is the game for you. Released in 1995 both for the SNES and the Mega Drive, the game could charitably be described as an early run at the formula that would eventually give us Injustice, but I'm not feeling charitable today, so I can instead describe it honestly as a heap of dung. The game has animations so stiff that it often feels like you're playing Madame Tussauds Task Force. Combine that with poor controls and underwhelming special moves, and you've got a game that's only really suitable for stabilising a wobbly piece of furniture. The two versions are similar enough that we're confining them to one entry, but there are a few minor differences. For instance, the SNES version has much better colours and sprites and a more varied soundtrack, so basically go with that version if you'd rather look at something nice while you're miserable. Number 14. Superman the Man of Steel, Xbox. Superman the Man of Steel was developed by Circus Freak Studios. I haven't heard of them, but with such an ambitious game, surely they must have had a lot of experience. Hey Siri, what else has Circus Freak Studios developed?
They have developed nothing else.
Nothing else?
Did I flipping stutter?
No, I'm sorry. Superman the Man of Steel tries. It really does. It has large environments, a number of villains, and an assortment of special abilities. But that's about all we can say in the game's favour. In spite of the title, if this game were your only experience of Superman, you'd be forgiven for thinking he were actually the Man of Cheese. He is embarrassingly easy to injure, the missions are timed, and the levels have no checkpoints. However, the cutscenes, at least, were cutting edge for 1996. Unfortunately, the game came out in 2002. Also, going by the box art, Superman seems to disguise himself in his daily life as mild-mannered Luke Wilson. Number 13. Superman, Game Boy. One could say that Superman for the Game Boy is an homage to the Superman serials of the 1940s. After all, it's in black and white, and it's terrible. In reality though, it's just another soulless licensed Game Boy game that can be completed in around 15 minutes, if you take your time. The story is that Superman has misplaced his keyring. At least I assume that's the story, since all he does in the game is collect loose keys and then move on to the next level to collect more. On land, in the sky, and in the depths of the ocean, it's up to Superman alone to collect every last key. You will periodically find explosives in the sky. You might think you need to collect those too, but no, those are hazards. Superman protects the citizens of Metropolis from falling keys, but leaves deadly explosives just where they are. My hero. I would say Superman deserves better, but honestly, I'm starting to wonder. Number 12. Superman NES. Superman for the NES is legendarily bad, so its high placement on this list should suggest that its toxic reputation is undeserved. It should, but it doesn't. The game is obtuse, the map is confusing, Superman's abilities are mainly for show, and even if you work out what you need to do, the game is so difficult that you'll die long before doing it. And yet, it's not all bad. It's only like 97% bad. You really need to dig for compliments when it comes to these Superman games, let me tell you. The graphics aren't fantastic, but they are decently cute. You just know that someone somewhere has a body pillow of this Statue of Liberty. And while the soundtrack to the Western release is like picking glass out of your ears, the Japanese version has the John Williams score. Okay, it's the John Williams score as fed through the Famicom, which means it might as well be played on a kazoo, but it's something, okay? Like I say, I'm really digging here. Number 11. Superman Returns DS. We have joked on this list about how weak Superman seems to be in most games, but we understand that that's actually because he needs to be weak for there to be any challenge. If he were anywhere near as powerful as he is in the comics and films, how could he ever lose? Well, Superman Returns for the DS, like its console counterpart, has the answer. In Superman Returns, Metropolis has a health bar. Superman himself may weather the attacks of his enemies just fine, but the city won't. It's not a bad concept at all, and there's a lot of room for strategizing. Moving between disasters on the map as quickly and efficiently as possible is crucial to mitigating casualties. In practice though, it feels a bit clunky and undercooked. It's partway between being a game you win with your mind and a game you win with your fists, and therefore not likely to please fans of either approach. Number 10. Superman the Man of Steel, Master System, Mega Drive, and Game Gear. This game has a fairly interesting history. It was released for the Genesis in North America in 1992 as simply Superman. 1 year later, it saw release in Europe, where fans also got versions for the Master System and the Game Gear. That's it. Okay, it might not be that interesting, but it's the closest thing to interesting you're going to get with this game. Superman the Man of Steel for the Mega Drive doesn't look or sound particularly good, as much of the game consists of walking from side to side, wondering why Superman can't fly. Still, at least it features villains such as Brainiac, Metallo, and Mr. Mixtuspitalik, which ironically I can pronounce, but I'm struggling with Metallo. All that aside though, this game is punishing, which I suppose is good because you should be punished for playing it. Weirdly, the Master System version adds the ability to fly. Considering the limitations of the hardware, it also looks better. The Game Gear version is superior in one way though, in that it's easier to fit down your macerator.
Number 9. Superman Countdown to Apokolips, Game Boy Advance. Early in the development of Countdown to Apokolips, the developers must have asked themselves, what kind of terrible Superman game hasn't been made yet? The answer was a terrible isometric Superman game, and they immediately set about bringing one into existence. The isometric perspective makes hitboxes difficult to judge, and using projectiles is endlessly frustrating. On the bright side, well, you don't have to play it. Also, the character portraits and some of the static images look sort of good. No, I'm not reaching desperately to find something nice to say, why'd you ask? Critics weren't impressed, which is good, because any critic who had been impressed probably should have been fired immediately. It was described as dull and repetitive, though the boss fights were received well enough. The game also provides an impressive sense of speed while flying, which is a genuine achievement on such weak hardware. If only it were even marginally fun to play. Number 8. Superman Arcade. While Batman and Spider-Man both had memorable arcade outings, the 1998 Superman game by Taito has little to recommend it. It also has very little Superman in it, as it's a brawler that could easily have been tailored to any property. Yes, Superman can fly, and at various points he can shoot lasers, but in the arcade in the 1980s, who couldn't? The main problem is that it simply isn't any fun. It's a brutally repetitive experience with an idea of challenge that's much closer to our definition of frustration. Making matters worse is Superman's fragility. The guy must have had a big bowl of cream of kryptonite for breakfast because enemies tear through him like paper, or perhaps super manuscript. Is that funny? I can't decide. It's probably hilarious though. The flying levels fare a bit better, but so does walking away and playing Frogger or something else. Number 7. Injustice Arcade. Producing an arcade port of DC Punching Simulator Injustice makes sense. What makes less sense is that Injustice Arcade was based on the mobile Injustice game rather than the console version. After all, arcade games are designed to suck away small amounts of your money bit by bit, whereas mobile games... Oh, right, I see. Injustice Arcade does introduce its own tweaks. For instance, you can use buttons to control your character instead of a disgusting, greasy touchscreen. It also dispenses trading cards, which can be scanned into the unit to unlock fighters. It's a nice feature. The cards may also give you a paper cut, allowing you to feel real battle damage for yourself. If you're having trouble finding a cabinet in the wild, never fear. You can own one for a mere $8,000, or you can download it for free. Entirely your call. Number 6. The Death and Return of Superman, Mega Drive and SNES. In January 1993, Superman Volume 2 number 75 debuted with an instantly iconic cover proclaiming the death of Superman. It caused a genuine ripple through pop culture and reignited interest in the character, suggesting that the only interesting thing the character ever did was die. The tie-in game, released a year later, did what most tie-in games were doing at the time. It took familiar characters, stuck them in a brawler, and actually... never mind, it did just the two things. You do get to play as a variety of replacement Supermen, however, but sadly none of them are Ardal O'Hanlon. Also, none of them switch up the gameplay the way you might expect them to. The game received middling reviews from critics, which is completely fair. It's satisfying enough, though, for a mindless trudge through a tiny selection of enemies, and yes, when it comes to Superman games, that does qualify as a compliment.
Number 5. Justice League Heroes. DS, PlayStation 2, PlayStation Portable, and Xbox. Justice League Heroes is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, the various versions of the game feature 15 playable heroes who square off against 12 supervillains, so there's something for everybody. On the other hand though, nearly all of the game consists of hammering face buttons and hoping you'll live long enough to fight the next horde, which is always exactly like the previous horde. Some later critics have called it Diablo with superheroes, but Diablo didn't actually come out until the following year. So did Justice League Heroes influence Diablo? Who's to say? Me. No, it didn't. The DS version is largely the same experience, but it looks worse, plays worse, and is more likely to get stuck in your dog's esophagus. There was also a Game Boy Advance game called Justice League Heroes The Flash, but we aren't counting that one, and that's unfortunate because it was the best received version. Thanks, Superman. Number 4. Superman Shadow of Apokolips, GameCube and PlayStation 2. Based on Superman the Animated Series, Shadow of Apokolips gets many things just right. It features that show's excellent voice cast, including Malcolm McDowell, Laurie Petty, and Clancy Brown. It looks the part with its cel-shaded graphics nicely capturing the style of the series, and believe it or not, the flying handles very well. Additionally, you have a nice assortment of superpowers at your disposal, all of which have an actual use in the game. The controls are tight, and there's even a cheat code that serves as a jab at Superman 64's abysmal draw distance. Bravo. Sadly though, the game itself isn't all that inspired. Nearly all of the missions boil down to beating up the same small selection of enemies, and the experience is plagued by glitches and collision detection issues. Also, as good as the flying is, the maps are tiny enough that you won't actually be doing it very often. This one does come close to being the Superman game we always wanted, but it has more in common with the Superman games we always got. Number 3. Superman Returns, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Xbox 360. Like Batman and Gotham or Spider-Man and New York City, Superman is inextricably linked with Metropolis. And as with Batman and Spider-Man, Superman eventually ended up getting a game that allowed him to explore his urban environment freely. This one is mainly based on the film of the same name, but it's really about Superman soaring around his city, saving people from disasters large and small, and squaring off against villains. The flying is actually pretty good, though the combat is quite uninspired. Ultimately though, what's important is the developers seem to at least try to figure out what would be fun to do in a Superman game, rather than simply cramming Superman into an existing template. Overall, Superman Returns has the best handle on how to provide a true Superman experience in video game form. Eventually, someone could pick up this framework and give us something very special. Until then though, it's a pair of Justice League games that are destined to dominate this list, and by quite a margin too. So, here we go. Number 2, Injustice 2, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. So, old question, but Superman or Batman? Who's the best? I mean, Batman, obviously, but you can find out for yourself by pitting them against each other in a fighting game. And here's a bonus, you won't have to sit through a 4-hour movie about what people's mums are called. This sequel to Injustice Gods Among Us was received about as well as its lauded predecessor. It also looks significantly better, but it retained many of the issues prevalent in that game, such as lag and shaky frame rate. Additionally, criticism was levied at Injustice 2's random drops and microtransactions. Why can't Superman stuff those into a big net and hurl them into the sun? Do something useful for once, you big dummy! Anyway, both this game and its predecessor are great, and we can't hold it against anyone for preferring the sequel. Its story isn't as interesting, of course, its environments are bland, its roster isn't as good, it removed the arcade mode, its gear system is lousy, and again, microtransactions. You know what? Never mind, I take it back. The sequel is good, but you are wrong for preferring it. I still love you though.
Number 1. Injustice Gods Among Us, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, Wii U, Xbox 360, and PC. Game director Ed Boon is best known for his work on the Mortal Kombat series. In 2008, he even oversaw a crossover between Mortal Kombat and the DC Universe, called Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. It was well enough received that it seemed the DC Universe fighters might be able to shoulder a game of their own. Enter 2013's Injustice Gods Among Us, which was a commercial and critical success in spite of what they did to Wonder Woman.
A number of viewers were disappointed that we didn't include this one in our list of every Batman game ranked from worst to best. But that was a list of Batman games, and you can't say that title was misleading either. Injustice is more of a Justice League game, and in the story mode, our good friend Old Supes, as he likes to be called, is actually the antagonist. Sort of. There are alternate dimensions and time travel at play here. It's basically Back to the Future with codpieces, but the point is, we felt it fit just a bit better on this list rather than the Batman one, and we have no reservations about putting it at the absolute top. I mean, have you seen most of the other games in this video? We'd have been mad not to.